Let's get going. Hello and welcome to our PIM question time. So glad that so many of you could join us this morning, and we're here to help answer your questions around product information management systems, or PIM, as you'll hear throughout the morning for short. And we'll answer your questions and hopefully help you to deliver superior digital experiences to your customers and to your users. We've already received a lot of questions, and we're going to try our best to get through as many of these as possible within the hour. So firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Nicholas Webber. I'm one of the business consultancy directors here at Inviqa, and my role is to help organizations across many different sectors define their digital strategies and achieve their goals much faster using digital initiatives. So this morning I'm joined by James Barlow and Tim Bancroft from Akeneo. And Akeneo is a business that provides enterprise level PIM solutions, and Inviqa is a certified Akeneo implementation partner. So together, Inviqa and Akeneo have implemented PIM solutions across a range of organizations, including an international online pharmacy, a pure play fashion retailer, as well as a large B2B retailer. And there are many more in the pipeline. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome James and Tim. And please, could you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, Nicholas. Hi, everyone. I'm James. I'm the Regional Director for the UK and Ireland at Akeneo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Bancroft, and I'm the Head of Pre-Sales for UK and Northern Europe at Akeneo.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much indeed for taking the time to join us. And this morning, I'm going to ask the questions, and we've got quite a lot to get through. Our first question is a really sensible one for those who have heard about PIM but are not sure why they need one. So actually, James, could you just explain to us what a PIM is and why I might need one?
It'd probably be quite a worrying start if I couldn't answer that. But look, I think, well, I know that the PIM market has matured significantly, especially in the UK in the last few years. So I'll make a slight assumption that most people on the call at least have a foundational knowledge on what a PIM is. For those that aren't aware, an analogy that typically works well is a PIM acts as your CRM, but for product data. So if we go back 15 or 20 years ago, where everyone was storing their customer relationship data on Rolodexes or Excel spreadsheets, and that was a nightmare because the information was disparate, it was hard to synchronize, it was hard to manage, and that was then the birth of CRM. And now it's almost every industry's norm to arm their sales and customer success guys with some form of a CRM. That exact same situation has happened with product information maybe 10 years later. So it's acting as the one central source for all product information, regardless of where the end destination is. On the second point of your question of why we need one, the focus for PIM is typically threefold. So the first of which is to help you sell faster. So there's a big focus on the productivity. So getting rid of that duplication. You've got silos of people producing the information for marketplaces, another team for e-com, another team maybe for the print catalogs, and allowing the systems to do a lot of that heavy lifting to automate much of that product information creation. And in turn, a result of that is going to help you launch products to market faster. The second area is to help you sell better. So again, taking the guidance and support of the platform to allow you to create a better product experience, better product information, which is going to increase your sales conversions. And the last area of focus is really around helping you sell anywhere. So that's just giving you that agility that you now have this one central source of all information, so you can easily plug that into a new channel if you're opening up into a new marketplace or opening up into a new country. So it's taken into consideration, ensuring the data is in the right format for Amazon, who obviously have their own rules and formats you need to adhere to, or supporting you in localizing that for a new territory.
Thanks, James. So that's what a PIM is, but what is the difference between a PIM and PXM? So that is a question we've had. Tim, could you take us through what the differences are?
Yeah, definitely. So we're only just getting used to the word PIM or the acronym PIM, and now there's this PXM one in the mix as well. So it is just worth kind of explaining what the difference is really. So the way to think about PIM, PIM is the tool, PIM is the solution that you will use essentially to manage your product data and get all the benefits that James has just described. So that is an area that you can use to store things. It's got a great, they normally have good user experiences, lots of efficiency tools, all of that good stuff. PXM is more the practice and the principles that surround it. So it's all well and good having a system, but if you're not managing things in the right way and you don't have a strategy around the information that you're sharing with people, ultimately you can still fail. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to excuse myself already and say I am going to use Apple in this example. I know Apple probably comes up in every webinar we kind of people do, but they're a good example for marketing. And if you have a look at the way that they market and the way that they advertise their products, after this, just go online and search for them on a marketplace, search for them on their website, look at them on a billboard. It's consistent. Everything is the same. The fonts, the imagery, the messaging, everything, and all their advertising is a phone, but you really, really want that phone. And they do it very, very well. And wherever you go, it's consistent. And that's what product experience management is. It's allowing you to have a strategy around it. The PIM is a central storage, so you only have to store the information once, but you then choose strategically how to use that information in other places.
Brilliant. Well, with that in mind, what are the possibilities when it comes to managing product information on in a PIM? Tim?
So what are the options or the possibilities, do you say?
Yeah, exactly. What are the possibilities when it comes to managing product information in a PIM?
The main one is having a centralized management area data. We work with a lot of clients, and it's surprising how many clients are still trying to do things in an informal way, or using spreadsheets, or kind of they've just evolved. They've been victims of their own success almost, and then they've taken a step back and going, this isn't scalable. Like, we can't work this way anymore because we're finding we've got different versions of the spreadsheet. I've just filled in one and then we get another version. It is so easy for user error to occur in those situations. So the main thing is just getting it all in one place and having one version of the truth. And then you can see what you've got. And the benefit of kind of PIM systems in general is they'll generally give you a gauge as to what the status of that data is. So how accurate it is. So, tracking things like whether it's got relevant imagery or whether you've got the right spellings, and, whether things are the right translation. Have we put the wrong translation in French, for example? Those are things that PIM can identify. And just making sure that it's scalable as well, having reusable functions, automation in there, in order to kind of do things that would normally take you a lot of time. Mm-hmm. You get a new pair of shoes or a range of shoes coming in. Well, they're going to go into the clothing shoes category on the website. Why do we need to do that every single time manually? Let's build a rule or an automation to automatically detect things and put them in the right place, giving people time back to do the more strategic things like really impactful marketing descriptions and building that product experience. So those are the main things really, and being able to do a lot more with the same amount of people. As you scale, as your business is successful, what you don't want to have to do is have a small army of people literally inputting data. If we can have a tool that can help with that and make it more manageable, then ultimately you can succeed and get products to market quicker. And then also things like better engagement with like suppliers, having an ability to get consistent information from them, supplier kind of portals and the ability to integrate their data. And I suppose the last thing really is AI. I know it's a buzzword, it's artificial intelligence is a thing you hear all the time. What we mean by it is basically using the system to detect things that might be wrong, or do things in a way that is more automated and efficient. So those are the main things really from a PIM, but obviously there's a lot more value you can add depending on how you configure and implement it.
So there's a question here about what or how does product information impact a retailer or a brand? So James, what do you think the product information impact is on a retailer or a brand?
Yeah, good question. I think if you think of the climate we're in now, we were moving towards that anyway, but obviously COVID has seen us have an influx of and organizations selling online have had to pivot their business to go B2C during COVID. Equally, on the consumer side, we had a major influx of first-time online buyers. If you think about that transition and the actual customer journey or the buying journey online, whether that's on your e-commerce or whether it's on marketplace, there is a distinct absence of that in-store experience where you can touch and feel and try on the product that that retailer or brand is selling. When a visitor is on your product page online, they're at the complete mercy of whatever product information that that retailer has put in front of them. And there's something that we talk about a lot just to drill home the importance of product information and product experience, and that's the 5-second rule. And what that rule states is, once a visitor lands on your product listing, which, by the way, can be an uphill battle just to get to that stage in terms of driving traffic to your website in the first place, but once on your product listing, you have on average 5 seconds to convince them to stay and potentially purchase your product, or they lose interest and go elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing far too often is people are just, and it's not through a lack of desire, it's typically down to workload issues. They're just listing plainly what their product is. They're not actually using their information as an asset to actually convince that consumer to stay and convince them to ultimately buy the product. I'm sure Tim's probably got some more thoughts on this.
Yeah, anything to add, Tim?
Yeah, an extension of what you're saying really is it's, you've almost got to compensate now for the lack of those experiences in store. You've got to be able to provide something online which is giving them what they need, but it's a different experience. And I think one of the main things is data accuracy and the consistency of the information. Like I was saying earlier with the Apple example, is everywhere you see things, it's consistent messaging, and there are no spelling issues in there. The data is accurate. You know what you're getting. And I'm just thinking to like a situation I literally had this week. It's been lovely weather across the UK this week, which is rare. So I thought, get out in the garden, need to buy some flower pots. And I'm no expert when it comes to buying flower pots, but essentially I wanted something about this big. That's really what I wanted. So I went online. I won't share the brand that it was, but I saw what I thought I needed. There was very limited information, but it seemed the right product at the right price. When it arrived, I kid you not, it was this high and this wide. Like, it's as big as a swimming pool. I'm going to go take lengths in it after this. It's massive, and it's great, but it's not what I thought I was ordering. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is setting those expectations and making sure people are clear what they're buying, and they don't have to root around for the information. If they're going to do that, they'll either go somewhere else, or they'll do what I did and then feel hesitant to buy from there again, just in case I have the same experience a second time. So that becomes more and more important than it ever was in store. And I think this is why we're seeing kind of an increased interest in PIM technology, because people are struggling to get that information right.
And Tim, I'm going to ask you this next question, which is quite a technical question, so you might need to do a little bit of making it a little bit simpler. How do you see PIM fitting into the new landscape of composable commerce, or also known as headless architecture, for e-commerce installations?
Oh, good question. So what I've been seeing, it's not just in the PIM world, but generally in web-based technologies, is this decoupling of responsibilities, or having smaller responsibilities for each system. So you'll have a best of breed e-commerce, you'll have a best of breed PIM, you'll have a best of breed ERP, you'll have a best of breed asset management solution. All of these things have to work harmoniously together in order for them to be effective. And I think what a lot of software vendors have realized is they can't be everything, or if they do, they're not going to be able to do it as powerful in as a powerful way. So what we're finding is we're staying true to our roots as well, and thinking, well, why did we exist in the first place? And we existed because we wanted to solve that product information management system. What we never wanted to be was a CMS or kind of a website builder. So we're finding this with all the solutions, and what we're finding now is there's things like they're called APIs, which are just ways of connecting systems in a standardized way. They're becoming more and more advanced, more easier to work with, and it's allowing you to basically choose from a menu of things, work with someone like an Inviqa and go, right, well, can you guide me? Well, based on what my challenges are, what solutions would you put in and what combination in order to get the right thing for me? And I think that's where it's important, is not one system isn't going to be the right thing for everyone. So if people have the ability to bundle things together in a way that they feel is better for them, then it gives them more flexibility, and they get their business needs met probably more closely than they would do going with one system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we feel we are. We're kind of there to feed these e-commerce systems and all of the other systems that are already there, or people are looking to re-platform onto, and being that kind of bit in the middle that everyone can connect to and interface with.
Great. So another really important question here, James. I think this is probably one that most of the audience will be thinking about. What are the most common mistakes that you see when you're doing some PIM implementations? What do people get wrong, and what should they do right? What can they do to get it right?
Sure. So there's a couple of thoughts that spring to mind. I think something that we see fairly often is the PIM project can often be seen as an IT-based project, at least in the early stages, because they're trying to define their data flow and is the product starting in a PLM or an ERP, or are we moving that over to PIM? Is it then connecting into various different e-commerce storefronts and marketplaces, etc., etc.? I think that's fine from an early stage, but when we get to the implementation stage, it's imperative that we're involving kind of the wider stakeholders, especially from the guys that are actually going to be using the PIM. What we don't want to be doing is creating or configuring a PIM based on just IT alone's guidance, because I mean, let's face it, it's very rarely going to be the IT team that are on the front line of enriching and creating product information. So it's imperative that we're setting this up to make the actual buying merchandisers, e-com marketing, whoever it might be, their lives easier. So we want their feedback. That isn't me saying let's welcome death by committee, but one or two stakeholders from the business is crucial. I think another point which is slightly more nuanced is if you're coming up to an e-commerce re-platforming project. So, I mean, either you're doing a major upgrade. We saw a lot of our clients and prospects moving from M1 to M2 last year, which isn't just an upgrade, it's a full re-platform. Maybe there's others in the audience today that are moving from one to another completely different platform. The advice and the ideal way of doing things is, if you're considering doing PIM, get the PIM and the product information sorted first, or at the very least in parallel to the e-commerce project. We see far too often people moving over to a new e-commerce project, bringing all of that data, which undoubtedly would have brought up or still has a lot of retired product data, suboptimal product data, and then you're kind of muddying that brand new platform. Whereas if you bring in the PIM first, you're allowing the system to help you cleanse and structure and get the data to the level of quality you want it to be, but also it acts as the data conduit between the two platforms. You're plugging it in at both ends. So it's a big piece around de-risking, but also accelerating the re-platforming piece. And
if that's some of the common mistakes, how can I also, this is another question, how can I support my reseller partners with PIM?
We actually get this question a lot, to the extent that we actually launched a module dedicated to it earlier this year. And for those that aren't aware, I mean, I'm assuming this is the angle that the question's coming from. We have a lot of clients. We have a lot of clients in food and drink, for example, where they're in the distribution or the manufacturing center. It's not unique to food and drink, of course, but there is a massive pain, and it's a hugely laborious process to get the data created in your own internal systems, but then syndicate that data out to your dozens or hundreds, if not thousands, of resellers in the format that they require. And it's not just a one hit. The reason why I used food and drink is later this year we have the Natasha law coming into play, where we need to have a greater focus on allergen information and nutritional information. So if there's a new legislation or law coming into play, you then need to make sure that all of your resellers have the live up-to-date information, or maybe the live up-to-date imagery, and that can be a huge pain. And we see a lot of our clients or a lot of our prospects have dedicated teams. So we launched a module called Shared Catalogs, and what that acts as is each one of your resellers has really a subset of your PIM that is within a clean UI, and you're just, every time you're editing the product and the PIM side on your business, it's providing that live feed in the format in a tailored UI based on what you want to make available to that reseller.
Tim, question for you. How can I connect my social media channels to a PIM system? So I'm assuming this is for people who are trying to sell on Instagram or Facebook. How can they connect their products from a PIM system to those sort of channels?
I suppose there's two components to that. I suppose there's the technical feasibility of it, and there's also having a strategy. So I'll talk about the technical bit first, and then we'll think about, you know, whether these social media platforms are the right route for everyone. So think about what I was saying before around APIs. So just to kind of give you an idea what an API kind of is, imagine a plug socket. And in the past, we had multiple plug sockets, you know, like we do around the world, European, British, American plugs. So not all things plug into the same one. And that was a huge, huge issue with connecting systems, because you'd have to have one set of skills to connect to one type of system. You'd have to change the way that you do things to connect to something else. So as internet kind of technologies have developed, there was a need to standardize. So rather than have multiple plug sockets, you have one type of plug socket that everything can plug into. It doesn't matter what is behind the scenes. The way that it can talk to each other is the same, essentially. So what that gives you is a lot more possibilities to connect to different things. And particularly with newer technologies like your Instagrams, your Facebooks, your TikToks, they all generally have APIs that you can plug into. So that bit is actually relatively easy. As long as we know what information we've got in the PIM, we can map that to what the social platforms want or require, and then build an integration that goes between, which is a lot faster and more inexpensive than it used to be in the past. So that bit isn't really a problem. The bit I would think about is your strategy. So it's that PXM piece again of, okay, just because those social media platforms are there, does my intended audience use them? Or strategically, am I expecting to get the return from it by putting my product on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it may be? Think about your demographics you're trying to target, and think about where they might be spending a lot of their time. If you think about some of the fast fashion retailers, we have quite a few of those, and we're finding that they do a lot on social. That's where the younger people are. They're browsing through their Instagram feed. They see something come up in an advert. They're going to respond to that rather than checking their email, which they probably don't check that frequently at all. So those are the things to keep in mind. And then what a PIM can help you do in those situations is make sure the data that you're sending and the media that goes along with it is appropriate for that platform. What you don't want to do on Instagram is have a nice landscape picture when people are browsing on their phone in a portrait mode. So a PIM can automatically create different versions of images to format for those different platforms. So think about that and, you know, test it out and say, right, well, what would I expect to see? What experience do I want on those social media platforms? And then configure your PIM to be adapted to that. And that will give you the most success connecting to social media.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Tim. James, a question for you. How easy is it to localize your PIM to new markets?
Okay, I guess that question could be taken two ways. One of which is, how can the PIM UI itself be localized, and how can we support the product data locally? So just to answer the former, if that is the case, one of the benefits about around Akeneo being open source is we've been allowed to go international from day one, which in turn has helped us on the localization of the user interface. So we're now, I think it's 42 different languages that the user interface is available in. As you can imagine, that includes all of the major global languages. Now, on the helping you localize your product information, that's a really key question. It's been a key question for a long time, but especially in the last couple of years, almost as soon as the Brexit vote happened, where we saw a lot of UK brands kind of testing the waters, whether that was on marketplace or a new international storefront. And there's a big piece that we won't have time to go into today around translation versus localization and people confusing the two. Just in a nutshell, what I mean by that is it's not enough just to translate your information from English into whatever language you're trying to go to and just launch that on the website. And if you want to see how that can go drastically wrong, look up the articles around Amazon's slightly shaky launch into the Swedish market last year. But localization is all around not only taking into account the translation, but also the cultural differences, seasonality differences. You're not going to want to launch your UK summer range if it's a fashion retailer at the same time as your Australian website. Mm-hmm. Obvious cases like that. In terms of how PIM helps, I think I mentioned it in one of the first questions you asked, Nicholas, around the three areas of focus. The third being to help you sell anywhere. And what we mean by that is the system is there to keep you agile. It's got a ton of features around helping you very quickly translate the information that you need. It can auto-populate a lot of your technical information, and by technical information, I mean the kind of the composition of what makes up your product. So mm-hmm. Color, size, kind of anything that isn't being impacted too much by grammar, so the rich copy. If we are looking at the rich copy, then we have native plugins into companies like translations.com and Wazen who can manage that all within the PIM user interface.
So there's a question here that I suspect a lot of companies face, and I'm going to ask Tim to answer this. We've got a challenge managing the volume of supplier information. Can a PIM system help with this management of this enormous volume of supplier information?
Yeah, it's a problem we see a lot. And yes, it can. I mean, when it comes down to a process thing, is what I see a lot is you have lots of different suppliers. You'll work with some of them more than others. So you'll have stronger relationships with some and not with others. Those suppliers could be in the UK, they could be in Europe, they could be in China, they could be wherever. So you've got a time zone issue as well. And then they've all got different ways of providing the information. So you're going to get spreadsheets. Sometimes you get PDFs. Some poor soul's got to copy and paste all the information out of that. You then need to get the translations. And mm-hmm. doing that with a large volume of suppliers is very time consuming and ultimately prone to error. So ideally what we want suppliers to do is provide things in a consistent way, which is very difficult to get them to do. Sending them the same spreadsheet out will ultimately get adapted and columns added and things like that. Mm-hmm. So what we're finding is that having a way or an environment where a supplier can log in, download a template or upload their information in the format that they've got it, and then having that automatically sanitized on the way through, so it comes through into the PIM in a standardized way. And we have a module that does it, kind of an onboarded module, but I know there are other solutions out there as well that try to solve this problem. Now, that's only part of the battle, though. Having a solution that does that and getting people to kind of put it in the right format is great, mm-hmm. but it's getting people to do it and getting people to adopt that new process is very, very difficult. And the first time I really understood this problem was actually in a previous job when I worked in the airline industry. And the challenge that they had is this particular US airline, what they wanted to do was start selling additional things like attractions, hotels, all that stuff through that experience on their website. And as a product owner at the time, what I had to do was find out the best way of getting that to happen. So I'd speak to suppliers of that particular airline and understand a little bit more about them and what they felt would be, kind of a best way of working. And one of them I spoke to was Disney, and the other one was actually just a small independent bed and breakfast in rural America. And the rural America one they were so receptive. Everything I was asking, they were really keen to share their experience, share their strategy. And what I determined from them is this airline was a great platform for them to sell their products. It was an avenue or a channel for them that was far better than anything else they've got, and they get a lot of revenue from it. Mm. So for them, you could just ask them to send it in any format you want. You could ask them to frame it if you wanted. They would probably do it because it was more interesting for them or more compelling for them to provide the information. Disney, on the other hand, completely the opposite. And what we found with them is they were willing to provide information, but it's in a standard format that they dictate. They've got so many places where they sell their services and their attractions that it just wasn't that valuable to them. It's like, it's a great sales channel, but I've got all these other airlines and all these other hotels and all these other things that we can't just do something special for you. So it's where the power is, and what can you do to make something compelling in order to ensure that suppliers will comply with the way that you need them to work. And one of the ways that we started to look at it is, well, giving them something back in that module. So we're finding now with one particular project we're working on right now is we're getting fragmented data from the supplier. They put it into there, and then it will get enriched either by something like, you see, like things like Brandbank and CNET and IceCap. There are services that you can plug into a PIM that can then enrich that even further and even push that back to the supplier. So now you've got two benefits. You've got suppliers providing information and you're getting it in a consistent format, but they can log into their supplier onboarder and get additional information in a more structured way than they could get themselves from their internal processes. And that kind of approach, giving them something back, can be a really good way of getting them to adopt a new process and you getting them to use the systems that will allow you to get standardized data. So a long-winded answer, but I just thought it'd be useful to
for that,
share
Tim.
Experience.
Thanks for that, Tim. James, here's a deceptively simple question, but I suspect there's probably many answers to it. What types of organization benefit from having a PIM?
Okay. I'll give you my genuine answer, which I promise is not intentionally flippant. And look, if you're selling something, even if it's only for one channel, chances are you'll benefit from having a PIM. I mean, look, obviously there's some anomalies if you've got a very small SKU count, so a few dozen, and you're only selling into one e-commerce platform and only one territory, then yes, maybe you can get by with a spreadsheet or even the staging environment of your e-commerce platform. But I think what a lot of people confuse PIM with is saying, okay, PIM is great for the Screwfixes and Argos of the world, where they've got huge volumes of data. It's complex because they're doing mail order, they're doing e-com, they're doing marketplace, they're doing social, which of course, yes, PIM is relevant for those guys because you can very clearly see the need that they would have, but it's not all in terms of, or not all down to volume of data. We have plenty of clients that only have 100 SKUs, but their complexity comes because they're selling into multiple territories, they're selling into multiple different channels. So they have their own e-commerce store where they have carte blanche freedom to do and put as much text and imagery as they want because it's their own e-commerce store. But then they're also selling on Amazon, so they need to change their tactic because they need to all of a sudden adhere to the rules and formats and structures that Amazon determine. Same with eBay, same with any marketplace, same with social media. So there are very few cases that if you compare the existing ways of working, so if that is an Excel and you've got siloed teams and there's some duplication of work, there's very few cases where you wouldn't benefit from using a PIM system.
Good. That sounds like a very good answer for us. What sounds to be a simple question. Actually, a bit related to that, there are a lot of different PIMs out there. What are the most important factors to consider when evaluating them? So I'm going to answer that question. Obviously, there are lots of different PIMs out there. It really depends a lot on what your business requirements and business needs are and how that PIM is going to help meet some of your business objectives. And we'd probably always look to start asking any potential client, what is the core functionality that's really needed today? And what are you likely to need in the future? What's your future digital roadmap, and what therefore does PIM need to be able to support for the business, and therefore what sort of system you decide to choose? I guess there's another one around what sort of resources available to manage that PIM system, and what other systems does that PIM need to integrate with? And is there a wider technical consideration that needs to be considered for instance, like integrating a product information management system with a digital asset management system. We talked earlier about best of breed and the flexibility that a headless system can offer, a headless architecture can offer. Is there a best of breed solution that you feel is particularly relevant for your particular industry sector? And are there any other commercial considerations that need to be considered? What is your budget? How far do you need to go with thinking around what your future budgets are likely to be and how you upgrade that going forward? And how easy is it to implement the PIM? What support have you got to do it, and how will you operate it? And you might also want to be considering how established the platform is, or the solution is that you're picking, and what the ecosystem is like, and how easy it is to plug into the various other technologies you're using in the business. So there are a number of different considerations. Answering all of those, you'll look at a number of different PIMs, and you'll probably come out with an answer. By the time you've thought about all of those particular points, you'll come out with an answer that works best for you, your business, and your industry sector. So we've got another question around any top tips about what a PIM should and should not be used for. For example, should you put sales prices in a PIM? There's quite a contentious discussion to be had on that one. Tim, I'm going to hand that one to you to answer.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as part of my job, I see a lot of weird and wonderful kind of use cases for PIMs and all sorts of different information. And I think over all of them, the one consistent thing that I've concluded is the two things you should try and avoid are things like stock and inventory, and also dynamic pricing. And I'm specifically saying dynamic pricing because you can do some pricing elements in a PIM. So the reason we say that is we have a concept of hot and cold data. So hot data is things that change a lot, change very, very frequently. We're talking every minute, every few minutes, that kind of thing. And cold data, which is things that does change, but we're saying, on a daily, a weekly, a monthly basis, things like marketing descriptions and imagery and those things. Mm-hmm. That's predominantly what a PIM is for doing your cold data. We're not talking about units of product. We're not saying, right, we need to store the product information for 400 pallets of this particular thing. No, it's the thing on the pallet is what we're storing the information for. So if you're trying to push things like stock and inventory through a PIM, think of that question we had earlier around having the right systems for the right things. And a PIM is not transactional. So what you'd find if you're pushing your stock and inventory through it, if somebody buys something on the best of breed e-commerce site, you push that back through the PIM to your ERP, which has got all the numbers around what units you have. By the time you've done that, someone else might have tried to buy the last one in stock as well. And then you have that disappointing situation where you've got to let one of those customers know that unfortunately that product is no longer available. And that's just not a nice product experience to have. So things like that, hot data, things that change frequently, avoid those. And when it comes to the pricing point, is if you're trying to do something like customer specific pricing, or things like airlines do, where airline prices change based on demand, that kind of stuff, again, not the right place for it. Your retail price, your cost price, those more infrequent changing pricing, absolutely fine. And you're finding now PIMs are advancing where you can do calculations on them and those kind of things, but don't use it as sage finance or anything like that. Just get the balance right and try and keep it to product information.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question around what the typical time frame is for integrating a PIM system if you've never had one before. So I'll try and answer that one. There is no real hard and fast rule about how long this can take. Tim mentioned the integrations before. You could have quite a few integrations that are needed to a lot of different systems, which might take a little bit of time. You might have a big complicated catalog to be managing, like James mentioned earlier. You might spend quite a lot of time having to cleanse the data before you import it. So there are quite a few related jobs. You might even decide to restructure some of the data because you've perhaps had manufacturer-led categories and manufacturer-led descriptions, and you might spend some time in making it more customer facing and the way customers actually think about products and categories. So there's quite a lot of work you might be doing there to get yourself fit before moving everything into the new PIM. You might spend quite a lot of time on having to get better images or add more images. So there's quite a lot of background work you might be doing, let alone the build, which can be just long or short, depending on how simple or how complicated your systems are and how many channels you're having to connect to. So I'm afraid there's no hard and fast rule on that one. Given the benefits of using product models compared to simple products, are there any plans to improve the functionality? Tim, that sounds a bit of a technical one. I'm going to hand that one to you.
It does sound like somebody who's got experience with Akeneo. So I'm just going to explain those terms for those who don't understand what they mean. Simple products are unique products, so one of a kind. You only sell one type of this thing, and it's just its own product in its own right. A product model, if you work with something like a Magento, you might know them as configurable products. But the principle of them is it's products with variants. So this t-shirt will come in white, it will come in black, it'll come in pink and blue, it'll come in multiple sizes. So particularly for fashion and retail, this product modeling is really important, because what you'll find is, just because this comes in a medium and a large doesn't mean I'm making it out of entirely different material. It's still going to be 100% cotton. It's still going to have the same washing instructions. Generally, fashion retailers won't discriminate on price for different sizes and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this information, we're finding that people were using them, copying and pasting the same information across multiple products. One of those elements changes. If you think about what James was saying around allergens and ingredients, imagine that changing in one place. You have to change it everywhere. Product models allow you to do it once and then pass that information down to the actual products underneath. So I think the question here is clearly around, well, there's clearly a benefit to that. It's having reusable information that you set once and then basically having multiple things impacted from it. And yeah, we are looking at it all the time. We're looking at how we can improve things. And most of our development is customer driven. It's all around our product owners will work with clients and say, right, well, what is working well? What's missing? And how can we basically make this better suit your needs? So yes, we're always looking at ways of doing it. I don't think we've got any concrete plans to improve it in the short-term roadmap this year, but we're open to ideas and feedback as well. And I think a lot of companies do this. I mean, every company I've worked for have had some way of doing this in an agile way. We have like an idea manager where the most common things that come up will get voted on and built into like kind of an idea. The ones that get the most traction are the ones that go in the roadmap. So the more feedback that we can get from our clients, the better, in order to improve really useful functionality like that.
Great. Okay, how can a PIM support an omni-channel strategy? So how can a PIM support an omni-channel strategy? James, perhaps you could answer that.
Yeah, I think we've probably had threads of answering this question in a few of the previous ones. I mean, in terms of omni-channel, multi-channel, that's where the power of PIM is. It's acting as the one central source for all product information, regardless of where it's going to. So part of that is ensuring that the system is doing a lot of the work to help automate the format that it needs to go into to channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, etc., etc. So reducing the workload and burden on your internal team, but B, as we've already discussed, it's ensuring not only is it in the right format and it's consistent, but it's using the AI that Tim mentioned earlier to ensure a high level of quality for all of your channels. You never know where that visitor is going to land on your product first.
And there's another question here around how can I demonstrate return on investment to convince my finance director that investment in a PIM is worthwhile? So that's always quite an important question to ask. I'm going to take and answer that one. So normally to convince the CFO, you've got to really have some numbers. We talked earlier, or Tim talked earlier, about his flower pots. Luckily for that organization, he didn't decide to return them, but actually that could have easily happened. So PIM can help you reduce your returns. Customers can make a more informed choice as a result of actually getting the right information. As a consequence of that, as a consequence of the improved accuracy of that information and the products, they might have more confidence in buying with you, and that then will lead to increased conversion through that improved product experience, again, that we talked about earlier. There's chances of expanding out to new channels and new markets is much quicker. So as new channels like Facebook, like Instagram, like WhatsApp soon, like to the rest of the world, become more appealing to people, you don't want to be having to take on a lot of extra bodies to try and manage that product information. You want to be able to use a system that can get that out very, very quickly. And that will help make sure that you get the operational efficiencies that when creating and curating that product information. So it will get you to market a lot faster than you would if you had to spend loads of time trying to change every single product particularly in the complex products that we talked about earlier. So all of those things add to extra pound notes or euros or dollars through the till, and that should be a good justification to help you demonstrate your return on investment. So look, how do I choose the adequate size of a PIM system for a small, medium-sized enterprise with about 60 SKUs in its portfolio per country? I think that's 60 SKUs per country in its portfolio. So I'll just say that again. How do I choose an adequate size of a PIM system for an SME with 60 SKUs per country in its portfolio? James, do you want to try and answer this one?
Yeah, sure. I was just looking at the Q&A. I think Peter's asked a fairly similar question. So when you're deciding on PIMs and deciding on the size of PIM, the SKU count isn't necessarily the main consideration. There's more important considerations in terms of the size of your team, their existing workload of creating data, the channels that you're sending them out to. So I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but in terms of how your channel's being fed, is it multiple marketplaces, is it social media, is it e-com, is it all of the above? And also obviously the translation capabilities. In terms of PIMs, I mean, there are certainly PIMs that specialize in SMB. There are PIMs that specialize purely in enterprise. At Akeneo, we have options that cover kind of all areas from small up to enterprise. But it would mainly be a consideration. It's not necessarily with regards to SKU count. It's mainly around kind of feature set aligned with what your business strategy and your business issues are, which is where I'd say I'd have your focus on rather than just a number of SKUs.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this is a similar or quite a related question as well. Can a PIM help you create unique product data for any given channel?
Absolutely. So maybe not to go too granular, but every single attribute that you create within a PIM can be labeled as that needs to be unique. So that could be unique for a certain sales channel to say, okay, well, this image doesn't have a headshot, so that's for Amazon because we know that Amazon don't allow headshots if we're selling a fashion garment. Equally, it could be a unique attribute for a different territory. I mean, Tim was using the analogy of plugs earlier when he's explaining APIs. So if it is plug type, but you're selling a fan, then you would need to have a unique attribute for the plug type. Because if you're selling the same fan, but it's 3-pin for the UK and 2-pin for the rest of Europe, then that needs to be unique. I mean, maybe that wasn't the purpose of the question. That's going quite granular, but there are a variety of features within PIM that can help you automate a lot of the creation of product data and keep it what's needed to be unique. And also, as we've already mentioned, there's the AI that is not just helping you automate, but it's ensuring that the product information is of a high level of quality as well.
And Tim, what are the best practices for exporting data to various platforms, like to marketplaces or to e-commerce customers or content portals?
Good question. I think we got that one from Frank, and we've got a similar one actually. I think from Shalendra. And apologies if I pronounced your name wrong. I really did try and get that right. She's asked, what format can data be imported into Akeneo from outside systems, doing migrations, continuous APIs, etc. So I think I'm going to try and answer both questions at the same time. So the first thing is, well, what is the first best practice for exporting data? Automate as much as you possibly can, if you can. If you have a human in the middle, we're soft and squishy and unreliable. So we will make user errors at some point. Computer systems don't. I used to work with a guy who used to tell me that people like that computer systems don't break, people break computer systems. A computer will do exactly what you tell it to do. And if you do it right, it will do it right every time. So that's the first thing, is if you can automate it, do it, because it will save you time, effort, and energy, and will eliminate those user errors that can occur with lifting and shifting data.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you've also got to think about is, well, how many of these channels or endpoints are you sending things out to? We work with clients who will just do their website and a marketplace, or they'll do their website and a printed catalog, for example. Others will do website plus 15 marketplaces, and I've got 25 retailers to actually go out to as well. So each of those scenarios will be evaluated during the course of a project, but you can either do point-to-point integrations. Mm-hmm. So we have pre-built connectors for it. You can do API to API, again, plugging things in. Or you can go through a syndication platform. So think of that best-of-breed solution thing we were talking about at the start. Syndication platforms are out there to enable you to basically send data out to different places in whichever format you want, and it will do it dynamically on the way through. It will know what Google needs versus Amazon needs versus eBay, and it may actually be more cost effective for your project to invest in that solution and plug it into the PIM. But it only really makes sense when you have a lot of those endpoints to deal with. Typically, if you've got only a handful, it'll be point to point. So that's my best practice recommendation. Try and automate as much as possible and think about how much time and effort it would take to integrate all of them, and then maybe look at syndication if you've got a lot. Now, to speak to Shailendra's question around, what format can data be imported into Akeneo from outside systems? Through our API, and excuse those who aren't kind of technical, this will sound like complete rubbish, but we accept JSON format. So JSON is like a standardized format for what is called a REST API. We accept data in that format for an integration. But in the event that you can't do everything through integration, we also accept Excel and CSV-based content as well. And that's also something we allow suppliers to import, Excel and CSVs. So multiple options there, but automation and integration is the way to go.
And I think, Tim, there's probably in the last couple of minutes of this session, this is our last question from the audience, and this is probably best answered by you. Can you give us an overview on the integration of Akeneo with Adobe Magento, especially the cloud version? But actually, why don't you broaden it to talk about other platforms that you also handle?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we obviously work with the Adobe suite quite a lot. It's somewhere where we are very close partnered with, and a lot of people use it. And Magento is one of the biggest e-commerce platforms out there, so obviously we work with it a lot. But we work with a lot of others. We work with things like the big commerces of the world, the Shopify's, Salesforce Commerce Cloud is a big one as well. And you've got a lot of more smaller upcoming platforms as well. So we have to think about that and think about, well, we can't just put all our eggs in one basket and focus on teaming with them. We have this landscape of different solutions. So we have a concept of a marketplace. So you may have seen it with other systems like the Salesforce of the world. But the idea being is for systems that we work with regularly, we generally find that either we'll have built a connector for it, which is like a reusable multi-plug. If you think of it in the API analogy, it's a reusable multi-plug that anyone can use. You've just got to configure it to suit your needs. That speeds up your integration tasks so much. And we have one for the Magento suite that we manage. It's got support with it and everything as well. Now, because of our open source nature, is we don't just say, well, only us can create them. Anyone can. And a lot of our technical partners do. So if we're finding that we're working, or partners are working a lot with BigCommerce, for example, or with Shopify, they may build a solution that is reusable. They can put that on the marketplace for other people to take advantage of. So that's how we do it. But specifically for the Magento world, we have one that's just out of the box that you can take advantage of. But we're adding more and more over time. And in the event we don't have one can either be built as part of your implementation, or you do the custom integration like we were talking before to get something that's very specific to you.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Tim. And we're now into the final few minutes, and it's time to wrap up this session and this question time. So firstly, thank you very much, James. Thank you very much, Tim. It's been wonderful that you've joined us today and shared your insights and your experience and answered all those great questions. And thank you to everyone who's joined us this morning. And thank you very much indeed for all your wonderful questions that we've gone through today. And we will address any unanswered questions that come in after this session over email over the forthcoming week. So I think it's quite clear from the questions you've all asked today that PIM matters, and as our lives shift towards digital channels and increasingly as a result of COVID, providing your customers with consistent and accurate and rich product information online is more important than ever. And fortunately, as you've heard today, today's PIM systems can help organizations really achieve this quickly and pretty easily. So Akeneo in particular, it's a mature PIM platform, and it's been used by thousands of brands today, and comes with lots of out-of-the-box features and functionality that caters to most requirements and most situations. And Akeneo is also very easily customizable. We've had plenty of experience in this area, having implemented Akeneo in some of the more tricky and complicated environments as well. And just a last point from me, deciding that your business needs a PIM system is obviously a very important move, and it's a great start, but it is just the starting point. So you will need to think a lot about the development and implementation of a holistic PIM strategy to get the best return you can from the investment you're making in a system like Akeneo. And that's really where Inviqa, together with Akeneo, can help support you. Because if it's done correctly, a PIM system can benefit both you, your organization, and most importantly, your customers. So thanks once again for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure hosting today's session, and you'll be hearing from me over email in the forthcoming days with a link to the recording of this session if you want to go and re-listen to a part that particularly interested you. So thanks very much again for joining us. Wish you all a very pleasant day and see you again soon. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.